Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. New Year celebrations are on display around the world. London welcomes 2025 with colorful fireworks over the River Thames. Pope Francis calls on the faithful to respect and protect life from conception to natural death. And volunteers and supporters of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter's philanthropic efforts mourn his passing. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast with a hearty Happy New Year. Celebrations rang in 2025 around the world. In the United Kingdom, London brought in the new year with a fireworks display over the River Thames as the iconic clock Big Ben struck midnight. The festivities went ahead despite much of the UK being under severe weather warnings for the coming week, with heavy rain and strong winds due to affect parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Pope Francis ushered in the New Year Wednesday with a renewed appeal for the faithful to reject abortion. He called for a, quote, firm commitment to protect and respect life from conception to natural death. The pontiff celebrated New Year's Day Mass in St. Peter's Basilica that was dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus. In his homily, he prayed that everyone learns to care for every child born of a woman and to protect the precious gift of life. Life in the womb, the lives of children, the lives of the suffering, the poor, the elderly, the lonely, and the dying. Many Africans have high hopes for the new year. Here are some residents of Ghana talking about their expectations.
My wish of 2025 is more grace, more spiritual growth in the things of God. I want a traveling message as well. And then I want business breakthrough.
So we are looking forward for better things. We believe in that the new government is going to change things, especially now that the prophecy has come that after Easter things will start changing. We want change. We want change. We want the dollar to come down so that we can buy, can work.
So the expectations for the year is great. Because the year is going to be good, the economy is going to be good, finance will be better. So we would like to do things to improve ourselves by going to school, by improving ourselves in any way we can, so that we can also better our lives and have an improvement in our life as a whole.
This is our year of influence. So my wish is, first is to influence my academics and influence my colleagues, my mates, and I'm a peer counselor at KUST too. I'm wishing to influence the people that I meet, to influence their life positively. I started a business last year, but I didn't take it seriously. So the end of the year, my hope is to move seriously with the business aside the academics, and then also excel in my academics too, because I want to get to a certain stage.
Citizens of Zambia talk about their outlook for 2025.
How I'm going to celebrate my new year this year is that I'm going to go to church. It's bad to cross over without God, so I want to go and have an overnight celebration today. And after that, after the overnight, I would like to spend time with my family and my friend. We're having a family celebration this afternoon after the overnight, and my cousin is coming over.
There's no better way or time to close the year than with the loved ones, which is the family. So I intend to close out this year with my family.
For my 2025, I'm going to go to church for a crossover meeting, and then after that, I'm going to celebrate it with my family. So 2025, I'm looking forward to improving my skills in nails, and also hopefully go abroad and pursue my studies in cybersecurity.
We're going to have it in a traditional way, drinking some soup for it, and while us waiting for it, and hoping that we are going to have a brighter next year, because we are engaging ourselves into a political way, because we are 2026, after 2025 we are going to get to 2026. We should be able to have a very busy year.
And Kenyans are concerned about what 2025 might bring.
2024, there were a lot of abductions for innocent young Kenyans, and we really don't like that. Kindly do something.
And my expectation is that I want to see or to approach Mr. Ruto that if he is not going to give us food, it's better to leave the seat.
We must have hopes, because we are the people who believe in the word of God, and everything belongs to God. Even if the things are tough this way, but we have got hopes. This is a new year. A new year comes with new things, and with the prayers, we hope that all will be well.
It is a good day, because God has enabled me to make it to this date, because it wasn't easy. Last year there were a lot of things. The economy was not doing well. That is my observation. And people were talking about the taxes, the inflation, and the dollar. It is good that Mr. President was able to do whatever it takes to reduce the dollar, and now the dollar is a bit better, but life is still hard for the common person.
That was a three-country sampling of expectations for 2025. We have some sad news to report to you. In the United States, at least 10 people were killed and at least 35 injured when a pickup truck was driven into a large crowd in New Orleans, Louisiana's famed French Quarter in the early hours of New Year's Day. Police say the truck crashed into the crowd at high speed. Then the driver got out and started firing a weapon. The suspect died after a shootout with police, according to law enforcement officials. New Orleans Police Chief Ann Kirkpatrick told reporters that 2 police officers were shot and wounded in the exchange. The officers are in hospital in stable condition. Kirkpatrick says the act was intentional. The FBI, who is taking the lead in the investigation, says it was an act of terrorism. Funeral services honoring former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who died Sunday at age 100, will be held in the state of Georgia and the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C., beginning Saturday, January 4th and concluding Thursday, January 9th. Volunteers and supporters connected to the former president's philanthropic efforts in his long post-presidency are mourning his passing. VOA's Ken Faribault has more.
Suzanne Taylor from Buffalo, New York, admits she isn't handy.
Really, I have no building skills. I'm terrified of flying.
But when she went online to donate money to help Habitat for Humanity's recovery efforts after the 2005 Kashmir earthquake in Pakistan, something caught her attention.
And the banner ad said, now accepting applications for what was then Jimmy Carter Work Project in India, and it struck me like a bolt of lightning that was what I was supposed to do next.
Taylor volunteered with Habitat for Humanity to build houses alongside Jimmy Carter in India in 2006. She participated in a dozen more building projects hosted by the former president and his wife Rosalind around the globe.
So when you ask me if it's because of the Carters, that is the only reason I got involved.
The Carters spent a week each year building houses for Habitat for Humanity. The other 51 weeks were spent in the service of their nonprofit Carter Center, which fights disease, builds hope, and wages peace throughout the world. Something Chris Jones of Portland, Oregon, didn't know when he was looking for an organization to donate money to. Jones and his wife Barb were impressed by the center's financial management.
Turns out, I didn't know this at the time, but Jimmy Carter's quite the penny pincher, and he kept a close eye on how funds were spent.
Jones not only sent money to the Carter Center over the years, but also participated in one of its key democracy programs, election monitoring.
There was the Tunisian Arab Spring elections in 2014, and I got the call saying, hey, can you be in Tunisia in the next couple of weeks for this mission? and I jumped at the chance.
Jones later joined the center's election monitoring mission in Liberia in 2017. He's grateful that the Carter's global humanitarian work offered him an opportunity that transcended financial support. He says his election monitoring work was transformative.
Monitoring polling stations, watching the counting of ballots really gave me an appreciation of how the democratic process works in these countries.
Jones says Jimmy Carter would welcome being remembered more for what he did beyond his years in the White House.
But I think his proudest accomplishment was the Carter Center. I really want the world to remember how transformative he was and how much good he's accomplished.
Suzanne Taylor plans to continue volunteering with Habitat for Humanity and the Carter Center. She says among the greatest tributes to the Carters are the many supporters participating today and in the future who have never met either Jimmy or Rosalind Carter in person.
There are new people who are coming on board as donors and followers and builders.
The Carter Center has monitored more than 100 elections and continues to fight neglected tropical diseases globally. The parasitic guinea worm, which once infected more than 3.5 million people, is down to fewer than 20 cases. The complete eradication of the disease was one of Jimmy Carter's signature efforts with the Carter Center. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Chicago.
Nigerians are speaking fondly about President Carter.
His foreign policy was virtually focused towards Africa, particularly promoting peace building, democracy, and economic, social development in Africa, trying to bring about independence to countries like South Africa, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. So he promoted free and fair election in that southern region, South African region particularly.
And he's a good man, he's a human rights. If an African president can imitate him as a president of the whole world, but then as a human right, at least things will move on. But it's a consolation to him, for the family, because we lost him as a person in the whole world.
He's so dear to Africa, basically because of what he was when he was the president of the United States of America, and even after office. This is a man that believes so much in goodness and progress of Africa and Africans.
Nigerians, they are speaking fondly about former U.S. President Jimmy Carter. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump speak for Secretary of State, Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, is a well-known China critic. Despite being sanctioned by the Beijing government in 2020, Rubio says he's confident of, quote, finding a solution to engage with China if confirmed. VOA State Department Bureau Chief Nick Cheng reports on Rubio's legislative record and public stance on key China-related issues.
The threat that will define this century is China.
A vocal critique of China, Florida Senator Marco Rubio has proposed legislation to revitalize U.S. industrial policy and reduce dependence on imports from China. He also supports revoking the trade advantages granted to China, a position he defended as early as 2022.
We did nothing, while for over 2 decades, China methodically undermined our economic strength by stealing our critical technology, our manufacturing capacity, our jobs. We did nothing while they destroyed our social cohesion by luring away those jobs.
Now positioned to become America's next top diplomat, Rubio has advocated for empowering global partners against what he describes as China's growing economic and military aggression.
China now pursues economic imperialism, entrapping the developing world through the exploitative loans of the Belt and Road Initiative. They're now an imminent aggressor to our allies and our partners in places like Taiwan and Japan and India and elsewhere.
As a leader of the bipartisan Congressional Executive Commission on China, Rubio has supported pro-democracy movements in Hong Kong. He was later sanctioned by the Beijing government for what China said was his involvement in, quote, Hong Kong-related issues. Rubio has also pushed to bar imports tied to forced labor in Xinjiang and expand sanctions on those responsible for Uyghur human rights abuses. Nike Chin, VOA News, Washington.
The promised effort by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to remake the U.S. government is set to encompass one of the country's premier law enforcement and intelligence agencies. VOA national security correspondent Jeff Seldin reports on Trump's choice to lead and reform the FBI.
It's an announcement that took many by surprise. FBI Director Christopher Wray telling employees he'll step down when President-elect Donald Trump takes office.
This is the best way to avoid dragging the Bureau deeper into the fray.
And he shared some final orders.
What absolutely, positively must not change is our commitment to doing the right thing in the right way every time.
But change is coming.
Meetings went wonderful.
Kash Patel, picked by Trump to lead the FBI even before Wray announced plans to cut his 10-year term short, meeting with lawmakers and making his case for confirmation. The 44-year-old Patel is a former public defender and federal prosecutor who served as a national security advisor and at the Pentagon during Trump's first term.
I think what really makes him attractive to Trump is, again, that he saw what he thought and that the President Trump thought were abuses of the Justice Department, the FBI in particular, going out, perhaps investigating where they shouldn't have.
Something Patel has been willing to say out loud.
I am honored to be here in support of Donald J. Trump. He is being victimized, but we as a country are being victimized even more by the unconstitutional weaponization of justice.
Patel's riled opponents by saying he would shut down the Bureau's headquarters in Washington, reduce the FBI's surveillance powers, and cut the size of the Bureau's intelligence operations. He's also called for annihilating the deep state, and in his 2023 book, Government Gangsters, listed 60 officials who have disagreed with Trump.
Some of the changes that he might want to make, he can do it with tone or with some changes in personnel, but if he really does want to make these significant changes, that's going to take more work from the executive and the legislative branch, something that takes a little longer that he can't do all by himself.
Kash Patel, according to Trump, is the man to at least get it started. Jeff Seldin, VOA News, Washington.
Media arrests at protest, an elected official sentenced to prison for the murder of a reporter, and a historic deal to free American journalists from Russian prison. Christina Caicedo-Smith recaps the biggest stories for U.S. media in 2024.
A New York police officer pushes back protesters and reporters at a Gaza war protest at Columbia University early this year. The chaotic scene is an example of what experts describe as a challenging year for press freedom in the United States.
We've seen triple the number of journalists arrested versus last year. Last year there were 14 journalists arrested, this year more than 40.
The nonpartisan U.S. Press Freedom Tracker recorded 79 assaults on journalists and 30 cases of equipment damage in 2024. Data showed most incidents took place during protest coverage. This past year also brought a first in U.S. history. An elected official was convicted of murdering a journalist.
A Nevada court sentenced former county administrator Robert Telles to 28 years in prison for the murder of Jeff German in 2022.
The Las Vegas Review-Journal reporter had covered misconduct in Telles' office.
For us at the Review-Journal, it was just an overwhelming sense of relief.
The case had earlier led to a Nevada Supreme Court hearing to prevent the journalist's devices from being searched. The court in 2023 ruled in the news outlet's favor.
Although it was an unpublished ruling, they held that Nevada's reporter shield law, which is kind of the gold standard in the United States, very, very strong law, that the protections of the SHIELD law carry on after a journalist's death.
Outside of the U.S., hostile governments targeted American reporters with legal action. After months of being jailed in Russia, Alsu Kurmasheva and Evan Goshkovich, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, were reunited with their families as part of a historic prisoner swap. Kurmasheva, who works for VOA's sister network Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, later described the bleak environment in Russia.
I didn't have access to free and independent news for more than a year. But what I sensed even last summer, summer of 2023, there is this huge amount of uncertainty in Russia right now. The level of fear is the highest probably since Soviet times.
With Kurmasheva and Goshkovich freed from their ordeal, attention turns to Austin Tice, a freelancer held in Syria for over 12 years. Since President Bashar al-Assad's fall this month, the Tice family has been pressing the U.S. government to find Austin and bring him home. He is the last American journalist held abroad. Cristina Caicedo-Smith, VOA News.
Still to come, the U.S. space agency NASA leads efforts to return astronauts to the surface of the moon. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we take a look at the players of the technology industry in Africa, big and small.
Big tech wasn't really here. What have they seen in the past 10 years, which is making all of them want to put their HQ here?
If you're a business that sees itself going global, we'll definitely need some sort of like boosts. We need to tap into those existing networks that these big tech companies do provide.
Is there a downside to big investment in Africa?
A famous author once wrote, "A vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. A vision with action can change the world." As we begin a new year, let us come together on the next episode of Our Voices to explore the power of using a vision board to achieve our goals in 2025. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, the dance world is mourning the internationally acclaimed South African dancer and choreographer Dada Masilo, who died in the hospital over the weekend at age 39. Masilo died unexpectedly on Sunday after a brief illness, according to a spokesperson for her family. Born in Soweto, she was described as an energetic dancer and a fearless rule breaker who brought African dance motifs to classic European roles in a career that spanned 2 decades. And Ivory Coast announced on Tuesday that French troops will leave the country after a decades-long military presence. It is the latest African nation to reduce military ties with its former colonial power. Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara says the pullout will begin this month. France has had as many as 600 troops in Ivory Coast. The U.S. space agency NASA is leading an effort to return astronauts to the surface of the moon and to establish a routine presence on the lunar surface. As VOA's Ken Faribault reports, NASA says it will push the next mission of its Artemis program from late 2025 to early 2026.
Here to give you an update.
NASA Administrator Bill Nelson began his early December update on the U.S. Space Agency's efforts to return astronauts to the moon by emphasizing the complexity of the Artemis mission.
It's the most daring, technologically challenging, collaborative, international endeavor that humanity has ever set out to do.
Artemis 1, NASA's first step in returning to the moon, was an unmanned test flight in late 2022.
Splashdown.
When Artemis 1's Orion spacecraft returned through Earth's atmosphere, NASA staff noticed issues with the capsule's heat shield, meant to protect astronauts inside during the dangerous re-entry, throwing the reliability of the spacecraft and the future of Artemis in doubt.
Heat accumulated inside the heat shield's outer layer.
NASA Deputy Administrator and former astronaut Pam Melroy says NASA's subsequent study of the problem found a fix, ensuring the Orion spacecraft will fly future missions.
Our team did identify the correct root cause of the Artemis heat shield issue.
The first crewed moon mission, Artemis 2, was initially scheduled for late 2025 and would orbit but not land on the surface of the moon. Fixing heat shield issues and the re-entry trajectory of the Orion spacecraft is now forcing NASA to push Artemis 2's launch date to April 2026. Artemis 3, which plans to land astronauts near the lunar South Pole, is now scheduled for mid-2027.
The safety of our astronauts is always first in our decisions.
NASA Administrator Nelson underscored the geopolitical importance of ensuring the Artemis program can safely and reliably transport astronauts to the moon before China plans to land people on the lunar surface by 2030.
It's important in an area where we think there is such promise, the South Pole, primarily because of the presence of water, that we establish our presence there so that China would not be there and say, keep out.
Nelson also justified decisions to adjust the Artemis timeline despite a change in the presidential administration in January that could lead to further adjustments, noting the rockets for Artemis 2 are already being prepared for launch.
The life of the solid rocket boosters has a certain defined life. So we needed to get this thing going so we can stay on this timeline.
When Artemis 2 does launch, it could make history by sending the first woman and the first person of color around the moon. Future Artemis missions will increasingly incorporate equipment from commercial companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching and Happy New Year.